My name is Peter Slocum. I'm a volunteer with the North Country Underground Railroad Historical Association, which is very delighted to be part of the Solomon Northup Day commemoration festivities here in the Adirondacks. This is the 18th anniversary celebration of Solomon Northup Day. Also delighted to have descendants of Solomon here with us today, and we'll be introducing and talking with those folks later on. But I want to say a special thanks to our friends at Adirondack Architectural Heritage who made this space available, and to Mary Nell Bachman, who's disappearing discreetly up the stairs now, but helped to get everything set up for us and is been helping us to organize. We also want to thank the Essex County Board of Supervisors and the Arts Council for the generous support that they've given to this event, both here and in Schroon Lake. Not all counties in New York are as generous toward the arts as ours is, and we appreciate that. Keeseville, the North Star Underground Railroad Museum just up the road here, is a part of Solomon Northup Day. It has been for a while. In fact, it was under the auspices of the association that Renee Moore, founder of the Solomon Northup Day celebrations, was able to apply to the National Park Service for recognition as an official Northward to Freedom or recognized event in honor of Solomon Northup. So we've been involved in this for quite some time and are delighted to be able to continue it right here on the territory of the Underground Railroad Museum. And in fact, Solomon Northup had a history connected with us nearby in Peru. As a young man, he actually contracted to take some lumber down the Champlain corridor to shipment to Troy along the Champlain Canal through Fort Edward, which had us part of the celebration the other day. And that was part of his work along the canal, and apparently got into a dispute with the owner, the timber owner up here in Peru named Washington Allen, who didn't want to pay Northup for the work. And Northup had the courage to go to court, and he took this white man to court and said, "You forgot to pay me for the work I did for you." And Allen said, "Well, he was drinking on the job. I don't need to pay him for anything." But Northup won. He won his judgment for $50 for back pay and $5 for costs. And then Allen had the temerity to go on appeal to try to overturn it. And he lost again. Northup won again. But there's some belief that he actually lost more in court costs than he gained in back salary. But I guess that some things don't change too much. Anyway, that's our little share that we've found so far of the history of Solomon Northup in this area. But it's an incredibly important story for this whole region and for the whole country to learn about the struggles that people had in our past to create pathways to their citizenship and freedom. So I'd like to turn the program over to Don Papson, who's the founding director of our museum and the association, who's going to talk a little bit about the folks who are here today and introduce our main speaker. Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you, Peter. I'm very happy to see so many people here today. And I'd like to welcome you first on behalf of our president, Jackie Madison, who is not able to be with us because of illness in her family. I also would like to welcome you on behalf of Solomon Northup Day founder Renee Moore, who is also not able to be with us because of illness. This is the first year in 18 years that she has not been present. So this is a huge thing for us. We are very pleased that so many of Mr. Northup's descendants are able to be with us. We have 7 people, and that's pretty good, considering the fact that we've done this event in 3 different places this weekend, which is a challenge. I wanted to attend the other 2 events, but I couldn't because I had to work on this one. So I would like to welcome Irene Northrop Zahos and her daughters Rebecca Bingsler and Maria Zahos. and descendant Adrian Cooper, his wife Wanda, and their sons Sean and Khalil. We're very, very pleased that you are here.
Pleased to be here.
So please wave and let people know who you are. Okay. And we are very appreciative for all of the descendants that some of us have had the opportunity to meet in the past. It's always good when this event comes again each year so we can see one another and renew our friendships, because sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on, you really can't talk with everybody. So I really appreciate the fact that we all waited for John so that he could start his YouTube presentation and have it all in one take, because you are part, as I said earlier, of the premier YouTube presentation of the North Country Underground Railroad Historical Association. So you are part of history today. I also wanted to mention Vera Williams, who is a very important descendant, and we are very grateful for what Vera Williams and her family are doing to continue the legacy of Solomon Northup. You may have noticed that I introduced Irene as Irene Northup. Okay, I'm constantly correcting people or cringing when people say Solomon Northup's narrative. But the fact is that, and I checked this with Irene for facts, during the Civil War, when Irene's direct ancestor, Solomon's son Alonzo, enlisted in the Civil War, the spelling was changed to Northup. So, Northup and Northup, same family. Okay? After Mrs. Terrell's presentation, Irene is going to say some remarks on behalf of the family. I'd like to say a few words about our keynote speaker, Angela Marie Brown Terrell. It's very exciting for me for Angie to be here. And I really want to say up front, because Robin can't do this in her newspaper article. I hope you all saw her article. If you didn't have a chance to read it, please look at it over on the table. But Robin is the reason why Angie is here. When Secret Lives of the Underground Railroad, the book that I co-authored with Tom Clark, came out last year, Robin came over to take a look at the book. She walked in the door, I gave her a copy. She had only one question. Did you find a descendant of Solomon Northup? Not Solomon Northup, Louis Napoleon. Sometimes I get my facts mixed up, but I'll try to correct them. Anyway, did you find a descendant of Louis Napoleon? Okay, the book is about Louis Napoleon, who was an Underground Railroad conductor in New York City. And the story is that he assisted 3,000 people over a 40-year career. That's pretty phenomenal. That's more than Thomas Garrett in Wilmington, Delaware. Okay, the other subject of the book is Sidney Howard Gay, the man who wrote A Record of Fugitives in 1855 and 1856. So it's really 3 books in one. 2 biographies and then the Record of Fugitives, which is annotated. The stories are compared with the stories that William Still kept in Philadelphia, because he forwarded many people from Philadelphia to Sidney Howard Gay. Well, when Robin asked me that question, I had to hang my head in shame, because I had not found a descendant of Louis Napoleon. I had tried, but I had given up. And about 5 months ago, I never forgot Robin's question. And what happened was, after the book came out, as Robin explained very beautifully in the article yesterday in the Press Republican, there's another book out, inspired by the Record of Fugitives, by Dr. Eric Foner from Columbia University. And his book came out a month before ours. It received a huge amount of press. And 2 people responded to a newspaper article in the New York Times about Dr. Foner's book. Well, those were two descendants of Sidney Howard Gay. Well, I didn't waste any time in finding them. So I have become, over the last year and a half, very close friends, Vivian and I, of two great granddaughters of Sidney Howard Gay and two great-great-granddaughters. Well, about 5 months ago, I gave a presentation. One of the descendants of Sidney Howard Gay arranged for me to give a presentation in Greenwich Village, and after that I said, this isn't finished. There's a missing piece here. What about Louis Napoleon? So about 5 months ago, any of you who are researchers, you might have had this experience, We are only vehicles. We are helps. We are agents for the ancestors. And once they get a hold of us, and they know we're down here and we're going to tell their stories, they don't let us go. So about 5 months ago, I was sitting down at the computer, and a little voice said, try again. Everything fell into place. I found Angie's address, I found her phone number, I found her on Facebook. I tried to contact her, but she didn't respond. Robin calls up every once in a while and she says, what's happening? I know when she calls, she's looking for a story. So, we kind of talked a little bit, and I said, I found a descendant of Louis Napoleon. Oh, what's her name? So Robin went on Facebook. She said, we have some mutual friends. Well, Robin came over and we watched a C-SPAN presentation that I'd done, in Greenwich Village. The day before, I had received the death certificate for Louis Napoleon's son, William. When Robin came, I said, Robin, I have definite proof. Will you please contact one of your mutual friends? So she contacted Ethelbert Miller. And he right away contacted Angie, sent me an email, and next thing you know, we're on the phone. And just a little bit more than a month ago, the Sidney Howard Gay descendants and Angela were able to meet in Greenwich Village. This is recovering our past. And it's just amazing because Otis Kidwell-Berger and Angela have so much in common. They're both writers. They're both poets, And when we were there in Otis's apartment, I just felt, wow. I mean, Sidney Howard Gay and Louis Napoleon have got to be happy about this. They've just got to be. So anyway, I didn't write all that down, to tell you all of that. But I'm telling it to you because this is kind of what I am anticipating is going to happen today here. That Angela's going to share some stories. Angela is a journalist, and journalists tell stories. And people don't like history because it's dead. It's just memorization of facts. But when we know that history is nothing more than a collection of stories, people are interested. And they say, wow, that was awesome. That's really something. And every single person in this room has many stories. So I'm anticipating that what Angie shares with us today is going to be a stimulus, for people to share some of your own stories.
Okay. First disclosure, I'm a writer, not a speaker. Okay, I talk a lot, but there's a difference. One is organized, one isn't. So what I can tell you about my family, well, first I'll start with me. I was a very curious child. I read very early. I read constantly. I wrote very early. I've always been a writer. I can't remember not writing. And my mother and father would talk, and I'd listen, whether they knew I was listening or not. And they would talk about the family, and they'd tell jokes and all kinds of stories. And I started asking questions. Well, who was Grandpa? What was my grandmother like? They passed away before I was born. And my mother would tell me stories. Well, the family's been in Brooklyn since the early 1800s. She said she had my great aunt had a photograph album from 1811. And there were people in there from Brooklyn. Okay, so I knew I was an old Brooklynite. And that's kind of a prideful thing. Brooklyn is special. It's a great universe. And so I grew up knowing this, but I didn't have any facts, just little stories here and there. My mother said that Louis Napoleon, my grandfather, her father, came from a long line of people in Brooklyn. It struck me, I didn't have a story to tell at the time, but all these little stories began to stay with me, and you meet other people over the years, and they talk about their family roots and all. And I said, well, hey, my family's old Brooklyn. It was a point of pride, and I didn't know what I was talking about. But as a journalist, as I was trained for writing, I read a lot. So on a snowy Sunday morning, I couldn't go to church, so I picked up the New York Times early. Actually, it was online. And there's Eric Foner's story about his new book. And I love Eric Foner. I read all of his books. Like I said, I read a lot. And he's talking about the Underground Railroad. And to the side of this article is a sidebar by another reporter talking about the Underground Railroad in Staten Island and all. And the name Louis Napoleon crops up. Well, I'll have to take you back a bit. Louis Napoleon is a very odd name anywhere. My mother said that her great-great-grandfather, she didn't know how many greats or whatever, had come from France, that he was white, and he married a black woman. Well, in New York State, that is not unusual, and it's not usual, but it was more common, say, for example, than in some of the southern states. So that was a story that intrigued me, and I kept looking, and I'd see the name Louis Napoleon, and people would laugh at me. Napoleon, what's, kids at school. Oh yeah, I'm a relative to Louis Napoleon, They didn't know I didn't know what I was talking about. At any rate, so I'm reading this article, and this man is part of the Underground Railroad. Well, I'm a real history buff, African American studies, my whole writing life at the Washington Post and all. I do focus on American culture, focusing in on some of the true things about African American culture in the United States. And I feel that if we don't tell the truth, we're not really getting the whole picture. We don't know who we are. So I kept hearing this name. Got into computers, got online, Ancestry.com. I have a cousin who does a lot of research. I'm not one to do a lot of that. I'm not always that organized. But I started going in the background. I found a Louis Napoleon, and I found another reference to him. It was New Jersey. So things were beginning to click on what my mother had told me. I kept reading about it. But then I reached a roadblock, so I stopped. I said, okay, that couldn't be him because it's not going where I wanted it to go. Don't stop. It's not what you want it to be. It will go. It'll keep going. But I've always been one to believe in the universe, the spiritual world. I do believe in God. And no matter what name we put to how we got here, what our origins are, it didn't happen just because we're here. We know that there is something bigger than us. So I kept hearing these voices, and I do believe that, they would haunt me. Pick up the paper, read this, go here. I've gone places where I had no idea where I was going and found something. So I'm reading the papers this Sunday morning. There's Louis Napoleon, Underground Railroad. I called the lady who runs the museum. I called my cousin and my niece. I said, I think I found our ancestors. After all these years. And I won't tell you how many years yet. So we're looking at it, and I'm saying, okay, so I called the lady at the museum. She said, yes, we have the papers, and we went through some of the details. They began to click on what my family had told me. But not about the Underground Railroad. I didn't know that. There was not a clue to me. That was no connection there. But it was certainly a prideful thing. Hey, the guy had a good background, and I have some crazy ancestors. We don't want to talk about them. I'll just put them in a movie or fiction. I like to tell stories. But anyway, So I'm reading this and I'm all excited, and I didn't get to go to the museum. It was snowing, and the director was in the island somewhere enjoying the weather, and I never got up to the museum. But I went online, I started researching, I found different certificates that were available, death certificates, a lot of history. So I'm, again, minding my own business, taking care of my 2 dogs and my house and, going to concerts, enjoying retirement, doing some writing and whatnot. And I get this note from Ethelbert Miller. Somebody's looking for you. And he'd given Robin the wrong email address. So then I said, okay, I'll go on Facebook and get in touch with her. And so we did that, and I found out, and then I found there was the book that Don Patchen had written. And I'm reading this, and I'm crying, literally. I'm crying because it's like huge door opens up. You don't know where these doors are. You don't know when you're going to face them. And what do you do when you walk into that door? It's a revelation. Now I'm stuck. Now I'm up to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, which isn't too different from what I usually do, but now I'm really stuck at that computer. My eyes are hurting. I'm losing sleep. My kids are looking at, well, they're grown, but they, Mom, are you still up? Why are you sending me messages at 3 a.m., So, but that's what happens. It takes you out, and that's good. It's wonderful. Then I get up to Greenwich Village, and I meet Otis Gay Berger, and it's like old home week. I mean, these are people that I've been in the village many a day, and I won't tell you which little places I read poetry, but I was in the village on different terms, and you walk along the street, you don't see people, or you don't know who they are. And yet, when I walked into her home, I was at home. I felt so good. I felt like I'd known her and her children and her niece. I felt like we just started talking. It was like a new family, and it was exciting. So all I can tell you is, if you have any inkling of your past, anyone in your past, that you want to start looking at, go ahead and do it. Now, what has happened from finding Louis Napoleon, all the other ancestors are crowding and say, hey, how about me? Well, you've got your other grandfather and the other. So now I'm finding different people, names that I used to jot down. When my mother would talk to me, I would jot down. I have a piece of paper from the 70s. And she was just rambling, and I was just scribbling notes as usual. It didn't make sense to me then. I found that paper, and now it's beginning to tie together the names that I heard. Hannah, Emma, different names that didn't mean anything. Catherine, Logan. And Don has been a wealth of information because he does a lot of research. He's steady at it. I'm hit and miss. And it's fascinating, and it's invigorating. And I have a new career. I'm going to find my ancestors, but I'm going to write about them. And some will be fiction. And you might read between the lines. And some will be fact. But I feel like I have to do something with this. I do have to write. I have 2 children's stories that I'm working on now, based on my ancestry. My mother's maternal side is another long story. I won't even go into that now, maybe next year or something. But that's, they were finding articles in the New York Times about my family. Some good, some not so good, but they were there and they were written about. They were not quiet. They were not silent. So I think we need to really take what we get. It's not all good, but take what we get and put it together, because as human beings, we are not all good. We are not all bad. We are not all anything, but we are all everything, each and every one of us. Mm-hmm. So, put your spirit hat on, let it flow, and you'd be surprised how enriching it is to know how grounded you are. And also it teaches you what not to be, because there are a few things in there saying, not going there, not going to be like that, thank you for doing it, because I'm not, you know. So it's interesting. So I think there will be more television stories. We do have social media. We do have access to put information out. And I know I posted a picture of my mother, and I gave her full name, Dorothy Catherine Napoleon Brown. And I've gotten quite a few responses from people who have some Napoleon in their families. And I don't think it's as uncommon as I thought, but mostly as a first name. There were Napoleons. My mother had 5 brothers, I can't remember, and one sister. And I remember meeting my great aunts. They lived in Brooklyn. I grew up in a nice big brownstone, the ones that I can't afford now. But I was, a privileged little kid, walking around, and went to good schools. I was educated by New York City. My parents were into the arts, and so all the books, all the libraries, all the plays, anything, they took me. I was exposed to everything. And so I feel that if you do that for your children, they'll find their niche. They'll find what they want to do, but they'll be loaded with information and choices. We can't choose for our children. My parents couldn't choose for me. I was the oddball. My sisters were very straight and narrow, and I was very different. But I survived. And I have 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. I have 2 dogs. I've been married to my husband for 53 years. Right now he's in nursing care, but we had a great time for 50 years. Okay, so no regrets. And just listen to your music, listen to your vibes, and it will come to you. If you have any questions, because I have such a long story that I told Don, I'm nervous to talk about it because I can go on telling stories for a long time. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to.
I just have a question. You mentioned you were writing a children's book. I'm a retired children's librarian. Are you writing it for family, or will you be seeking a publisher?
Oh, I'm seeking a publisher. Yeah, I don't write for family. they want free books. No, I'm working on a novel. One novel that I'm writing, that I am involved in. I used to spend my summers in a town in Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia on the city line. It's called Lamott. It was named for Lucretia Mott, and it was the home of the first African American training ground for Civil War troops, called the United States Colored Troops. Mm-hmm. And so I used to play there at the community house and ride my bike all over, but I knew the history, and many of the families there that I am still friends with, those homes were built by their ancestors, and it was a very integrated, predominantly black community. The AME church is still there. And so I always wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to write a gossip book about, the town people, because I knew that too. But I knew they wouldn't let me back in if I did that. They're my friends. So I just thought that whenever I write, I try to write about something that's true. And I use black history as what I want to start with. And then I'll build my story around it. So for a children's book, children need to know all of these things. They have to know how to deal with life. That's how I learned to deal with life. And I want them to know, this is good. You have good things in your life. And this is how people did it before you, against great odds. And bring them up to date. But the other book will be a novel. It's a mystery, because I love mysteries. But it will involve a fictitious soldier who was trained at the training camp. And I'll bring in the story about that, and how Philadelphia was back in the day, and how he survived, or didn't, because you have to read it to find out. And the woman who was the ancestor of my friends today, She's fictitious, but I know the background and how she coped with dealing with this soldier. So, give me a year. It'll be finished. So, but children's books, children love stories. You can make up any kind of story. I was telling Don last night that my kids, we lived in Atlanta for a few years, they had tornado warnings. My kids were scared to death. They didn't know what a tornado was. They're from Philadelphia area. And my daughter was 4. And to keep her from being frightened and to know what to do as they were training her in school, I said, always go downstairs, go to the lowest point. Tornadoes don't have feet. They can't follow you downstairs. Go downstairs. So we used to draw pictures of tornadoes with their feet coming after kids, and they go downstairs. So that's how stories begin. You teach a lesson and take away fear and give people hope. Okay.
I am Irene May Northup Zahos. I am a great-great-granddaughter to Solomon Northup. His son, Alonzo, is my great-grandfather. His son, John Henry, is my grandfather. And John Henry's son, John Kelvin, is my father. As you see, and something I'm going to pick up on what Angela said, is there is a very interesting dynamic in our family when you look at all of us together, because you will see all colors. It doesn't make any difference if it is someone as white as a sheet, or blouse, or mine, or someone who is very, very dark. We are family. Even though we have different lives, we live in different places, when we come together, we are as one. We do have, as all families do, misunderstandings. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're a spit in the wind and disappear as readily as it began. In other instances, we do bond because there is an importance in our lives. And one of those important things is the fact that we are descendants of a man who conquered or overcame great odds. Anyone who in 2013 saw the movie 12 Years a Slave, I am told by a few friends that it was horrific. It couldn't happen. It was unimaginable. But it did. It is a reality of American history. It is a reality of Africans being brought here to America on slave ships in very horrific conditions, chained, laying flat on the deck in very heated compartments, if you will. Not able to be free enough to get up and go to the bathroom. They were released for 1 hour, and that was, of course, to do what they had to do and do it over the side of the ship's railing. They were given perhaps a cup of rice, and it was full of maggots. They also had bacon on that ship, which also was putrefied meat. So you can imagine the struggles that a lot of folks first met when they did come here to America. And the fact is, these slaves, or these Africans, were not only individuals, but they had lives, they had a culture, they had traditions, they had a religion, they had a language. And all of that, when they came here to America and were bonded, that disappeared. It was beaten out of them. And I do mean beaten. There are very many pictures that you can find in a library that shows the welts, the scars, and a lot of the other things that were done to these people. My grandfather, or my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather Solomon, was a free man. his father before him had been manumitted by his owner. Mintus had married a lady who was of not only African heritage, but also Native American and white. Solomon, when he married, also had a lady who he writes in his book was a quadroon. So she had 4 different cultures that her blood blended. So we do have that in our bloodline, the fact that we are, a mixed breed, if you will. The other thing, and especially today that we're talking about the Underground Railroad, after Solomon was released by Henry B. Northup, who went down to get him and bring him back up here to America, Solomon decided that he wanted to tour, or rather that he was urged to write a book, 12 Years a Slave. Sorry. And in writing that book, he made many tours around the country to sell it and advertise it and so forth. One of the other things that Solomon did that probably more was impregnated in his mind was to help other freed slaves, or I should say escaped slaves. And he became a conductor. We do have a letter, we do have other information that does confirm that he brought people from New York into Canada via Vermont. The other thing that Solomon used to do is he wasn't a rich man, and even though he and his wife did have occasional jobs throughout the season, his wife was a cook, in fact a very excellent cook, and very renowned throughout the Saratoga-Port Edward country, and also New York City, where she worked for a Madame Jumal. Solomon, in the meantime, had worked as a laborer, had been entrepreneurial with his Champlain Canal transference of lumber. He also played the violin, and it was the violin that actually saved him. We think of an instrument as, just something that, you use probably for an activity of to relax or maybe to play in front of a crowd. But for Solomon, being black and being able to play that instrument, he was able, even when he was unsure of what his life would be like in the South, was offered different jobs at different plantations to play at different parties. He also did that up here in the North Country. So that for him was a saving grace. It was also something that his father Mintus pushed him into learning. And children, they aren't really quite interested in learning everything, at least at an early age, but he did. He learned to play the violin. The other thing that's quite interesting with Solomon is his father did have a farm. And on that farm, Solomon learned how to take care of animals, how to work in the fields, how to tend to building a house or whatever construction needed to be done. He had all of these tasks learned so that when he did go south, his Mr. Epps and the other folks that he ended up working for took advantage of that. They took advantage of the fact that he knew how to raft, and you see some of that in the movie. Some of the other things that Solomon did, and as I'm going back again, he was not well off. And when he did take these escaped slaves into Canada, he was very generous because he knew that these people were struggling. And the only thing they had with them was this knapsack. And a knapsack, actually a bag filled with whatever necessities they thought they immediately needed. And you see, the Pope sick with a bag on the back of it in some of the photographs. But what Solomon did, he took from his pocket and he gave these people whatever he had. I don't know if he ever was, thanked for it, and I don't think he ever appreciated wanting somebody to do that. He didn't want to feel beholden to anyone. But that was part of his gift, his desire to help people, to let them have the same freedoms that he had experienced as a young person and prior to his being kidnapped at 33. Some of the other things I think that are interesting in my family is that Solomon's son Alonzo became a federal soldier during the Civil War. Alonzo was a private, and he became a member of the 26th Company, or I should say the 26th Unit, F Company of the United States Colored Troops. During the time that he was in action, the brigade that he was in was, you've all seen the movie Glory or heard of that movie? His unit, along with 3 other ones, were laying the groundwork for the Mass 54 to go in and attack that fort. And during that process, he was injured. He was bayoneted. Fortunately for him, he did not go to a field hospital that usually was squalid and rampant with all sorts of disease entities. He did return home. He was discharged from service. And he and his wife, Carolyn Victoria, had moved to Weesport, New York in 1871. Now, the reason for that move from Fort Edward to Weesport was because, like I said, they weren't well off. They had a growing family, and Weesport had started to dig the Erie Canal. So, because Alonzo had practice with some of these tasks, he moved his family there, and he did find work and was doing well for a period. He and his wife eventually had 10 children, which was not uncommon at that time. I've often looked at different information on my family. I've always had the desire to follow up and, see what their lives were, who they were, how does that influence me, how does that make me the person that I am. And with John Henry, I inquired because it was a professional Negro League team, so I sent a message to the people who run the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Lo and behold, the man was able to pull up a name, Northup, with areas that he played, center field, right field, and that was it. There was no first name. There was nothing else that detailed other than the fact that he played for the Cuban Giants. And as the person, my contact, said to me, well, you have to go about and look up more information and follow up. So it took me about a year and a half going through old newspapers, trying to find stuff through family information, photographs, which we really don't have a lot because there was a fire at one of the houses and everything, dissipated into thin air. But anyways, I found enough concrete evidence to prove that this grandfather of mine, John Henry Zip Northup, was actually that player. And the key thing is that John Henry had an original copy of 12 Years a Slave. And inside that first page, it was dedicated to him, and he wrote down Brooklyn, New York. 1903. Brooklyn, New York is where they played. So that, I guess, was the closer to that. So now John Henry has his name in the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. And they are writing a book of different players who belong to the Negro Leagues. And we're talking about big name players that we are aware over time today. Jackie Robinson, for one, Willie Mays, names like that, Don Gibson, and so forth. But they are putting a book together to bring all of the Negro players who played baseball and played it so well that they were challenged because of their color that they could not join the major leagues of the white leagues, which was kind of funny. The other thing I want to say too is last year I was happy to have gotten a lot of donations and support from Paul McCarthy at the old Fort House Museum at Fort Edward. And Mintus, my triple great-grandfather, his headstone was just sheathing away from erosion and time and so forth. And so now that headstone was replaced last year in July. And on that stone, it not only has the commemoration for Mintus, but it also, on the flip side, I have a cameo that I placed there, or had placed on, which shows Solomon from the title page of his book, 12 Years a Slave. And as Solomon wrote in his book, when it comes his time to die, he wants to live beside where his father lies. So for me, even though we're waiting for the time of discovery, whether it will ever happen, only God knows, but at least there is a stone that recognizes his being, And on the flip side of that, I'm also spearheading another campaign replacing headstones or putting headstones in of family members that we have found who have none. So mostly it was due to the fact that when they did pass away, there wasn't funds to put them in. My uncle, my father's brother, had actually put 2 headstones on some of the folks that he was able to do. So I'm just carrying on the work. But overall, we look at Solomon and we look at the things that he's done, and the key word is perseverance. And I think that is probably one of the things that our family has, which is perseverance. We've all, been on the downside of life, and yet somehow we take our bootstraps and we pull it up and we forge ahead. I started out in nursing school after I graduated high school. Well, life interrupted. I completed 1 year, left that. Actually, the thing that happened was the fact that in 1965, I had 2 brothers die, one in June and the other in September. So I am a member of 7 children in the family. And with the passing of their deaths so close together, I am the eldest child. I took it upon myself to remain home and help my mom out. Anyways, I got married, had 3 children, got divorced, waited a while, got remarried, have 2 other children. So I have a total of 5 children and 2 grandchildren, 1 boy and 1 girl. A lot of our stories that I learned as a child, I tried to tell my grandkids. Sometimes they're very interested in what I tell them. Other times, the energy is going out the door and doing something else. So I agree with Angela that the best thing folks can do is actually talk to your family, talk to your children. Do a Steven Spielberg and take a microphone and a recorder and get those stories on tape. You know, those are things that are very vital to anyone to have some sense of themselves, of what, like I said, makes you the person you are. You know, and I know myself and some of the research I've done, we've had thieves, we've had beggars, and we have had a whole entourage of bad people and good people. But in the long run, we're all people, you know, and we're all family. And everyone in one respect or another, or one aspect or another, contributed to the whole. So it is important to share. It is important to grow. It is important to love, you know, regardless of what goes on in your life. Take the time. Just take the time.
You find two sources for the same thing, then listen up. So both of our speakers have said the same thing, haven't they, essentially? The importance of the stories, of passing them on so that they continue to live. I have a couple of, for closing remarks, I'd like to add something to what Irene said. There is that document in Wilbur Siebert's collection, he was an Underground Railroad historian, about the reference to Solomon Northup assisting people on the Underground Railroad through Vermont. But actually, he was doing Underground Railroad work before he was kidnapped. He was doing Underground Railroad work in Saratoga Springs. It's very difficult to find information about Saratoga Springs. And I forgot to mention that Irene has a sister, Shirley, and a niece, Melissa, who were able to attend the events yesterday, were not able to come today. Well, Melissa sent me an email a while back, and she really panicked me because she said, "Oh, we understand that you're going to be sharing some new information about Solomon Northup." And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't have anything new this year. What am I going to do? So I did some digging, and I found something that's related. But I want to share a paragraph from Solomon Northup's narrative, 12 Years a Slave. And this is what he said. "While living at the United States Hotel, I frequently met with slaves who had accompanied their masters from the South. They were always well dressed and well provided for, leading apparently an easy life, with but few of its ordinary troubles to perplex them. Many times they entered into conversation with me on the subject of slavery. Almost uniformly I found they cherished a secret desire for liberty. Some of them expressed the most ardent anxiety to escape, and consulted me on the best method of effecting it. The fear of punishment, however, which they knew was certain to attend their recapture and return, in all cases provided sufficient to deter them from the experiment." So he's saying that he tried to encourage people to escape, but they were too afraid to do it. You see, what was happening was slave owners were bringing their enslaved servants to Saratoga Springs, and Solomon was working at the United States Hotel, and he would meet with them and try to get them to escape. "Having all my life breathed the free air of the North, and conscious that I possess the same feelings and affections that find a place in the white man's breast, conscious, moreover, of an intelligence equal to that of some men at least, with a fairer skin, I was too ignorant, perhaps too independent, to conceive how anyone could be content to live in the abject condition of a slave. I could not comprehend the justice of the law, or that religion which upholds or recognizes the principle of slavery. And never once, I am proud to say, did I fail to counsel anyone who came to me to watch his opportunity and strike for freedom." So even though he doesn't give us any names of any people he was talking with, he tells us what he was doing. And who knows, but perhaps some of those people he spoke with did escape. The irony of this story is that he was kidnapped himself and sold into slavery in 1841. Well, what I found is interesting because it supports what Solomon says he was doing in Saratoga Springs. 3 years after he was kidnapped and sold into slavery, an abolitionist editor, J.C. Aspinwall, visited Saratoga Springs. He was a reporter for the Green Mountain Freeman in Montpelier, Vermont. And this is what he said. Beside the free people now in the place, he's talking about Saratoga Springs, who are estimated to number from 3 to 500, there are quite a number of slaves here who attend upon their masters, their children, etc. Night before last, a company of these strangely disappeared and have not yet been heard from. They probably took passage in the Underground Railroad. I have sought every opportunity to inform such as are brought here that they have a claim and right to their own souls and bodies, superior to that of any other being except their Maker. To me, that supports what Solomon says in his narrative. So there was Underground Railroad work going on by white and black people in Saratoga Springs in the 1840s. Now, in 1855, after Solomon has regained his freedom, he visits Montpelier, Vermont, and the Green Mountain Freeman reports. His lecture, which consisted in a plain, simple history of his kidnapping and enslavement, was wholly without vituperation or even harshness. And yet, during its recital, we never had more difficulty in keeping our temper or our seat. We will venture to say that of those 60 attendants, not one left the house that evening without a new feeling of hatred and horror of slavery, which will never be effaced, or without a heart-burning anathema on a system which he felt to be nothing better than piracy and murder. This is 1855. This is before the Civil War, so he's continuing his work against slavery after he regains his freedom. After Solomon Northup regains his freedom, he narrates his book, it's published, it becomes a bestseller, and he visited Clinton County. It was reported in Frederick Douglass's newspaper that he visited Moores, New York, and he lectured about his experiences in slavery. He also lectured in Vermont. So I think it's very wonderful that today, in 2016, we have 7 descendants who are visiting Clinton County, who have come this far to be with us, to a place where their ancestor once came to lecture against the evil of slavery.